Last week's newsletter included background information on 2 of our candidates, and we thank them for appearing at our luncheon today. Abigail Becker will be serving as our moderator for our forum. Abigail has been the city and county government reporter at the Cap Times since 2016. Prior to that, she worked for the Wisconsin Center for Investigative Journalism. She grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and moved to Wisconsin to attend the UW-Madison. She graduated from Madison with a degree in journalism and digital studies. Thanks to Abigail for assisting us in this role, and I will now turn the program over to her.
Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, so those were all true facts about me. Thank you so much for having me here today. So the program format will be as follows. Each candidate will have 3 minutes for introductory remarks. Following these presentations will be the Q&A section of the forum. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond to each question. And then following the Q&A, candidates will have 2 minutes to offer closing statements. We have a timekeeper today, and that is Ron Luskin, who is seated down in front. And so he will hold up signs, and he has a timer as well to alert candidates about how much time they have remaining and when their time is up. So thanks for doing this. All right, so we can jump in with the first set of opening statements.
My name is Paul Soglin. In 2007, I came before you. I was not holding public office. I was in the private sector at the time. And I asked to share some thoughts with you about the political environment in our community and the status of our community in regards to race and progress. 8 years ago, I came before you. And while my opponent said, and I quote him, "There are no troubled neighborhoods in Madison," I said race and poverty are the critical issues of the day, and those must be addressed now because we've been inattentive for the past decade. We have made some marvelous accomplishments during the last 8 years, and I hope we'll get into some of those details. But I think there's a couple of points to frame who and what we are. Let us be very clear about something. This is not a racist city, and I will repeat it. You are not racist. The people of this city are not racist. But we share the legacy of the United States of America, a legacy which has to confront the great disparity that is a legacy of, unfortunately, the people who founded this nation. There are some significant conversations taking place. They involve the criminal justice system. They involve city, county, and state government. And inadequately, they involve executive leadership in the White House. Fundamentally, I know that this is a caring, compassionate city. But just because we care about the issues of diversity, the failures of centuries, not just decades, doesn't mean we all have the answers. And I would put it to you this way. There must be accountability in the assertions that politicians make. There must be accountability. And I stand before you, ready to be accountable for what I said 8 years ago, what I said 4 years ago, and for what has transpired in terms of the achievements we've made. 8 years ago, African American unemployment in this community was over 25%. It was higher than the national average. It was higher than the state numbers. Now it's a bit over 6%, but it is better than the nation and better than the rest of the state. 2/3 of African American children in this community were living in households that were in poverty. We have flipped that. It's now 1/3. And household median income has obviously gone up. We're not done yet, but it took imagination, it took creativity, it took boldness that you didn't see anywhere else in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Soglin. Satya, you're up next.
Thank you, Abby, and thank you, Rotarians, for having us here today. I very much appreciate the opportunity. My name is Satya Rhodes-Conway. Let me say that again. Satya Rhodes-Conway. And I moved to Madison almost 20 years ago now. I came, as many people do, for an internship. Others come for school or jobs. And it did not take me long to fall in love with Madison. I knew on a beautiful fall day, just after the farmer's market, that I never wanted to go back to LA because of the incredible quality of life that we have here. That internship turned into a job. I got another job at UW. I now live over by Oscar Mayer with my partner, where we've been for the past 10 years. But I am keenly aware that the opportunities that Madison has given me are not available to everyone. They're not available to folks that have lived here their entire lives, but they're increasingly unavailable to folks like me that come from somewhere else and now can't afford to live in Madison. They can get a job, but they can't buy a house or find an apartment. And that's why I'm running, because everyone in Madison should have the opportunity to thrive. And that means that we need to work on affordable housing and rapid transit and racial equity and being prepared for the impacts of climate change. For the past 13 years, I've been running the Mayor's Innovation Project, which is a national learning network for mayors and their senior staff based out of UW. So it is literally my job to answer questions from mayors all across the country and to present them with the best, the most cutting edge, the most progressive ideas in city policy. And not just to gather those ideas, but to put them in a format that are actionable, that they can implement in their cities right away. So I am ready to bring those ideas, those connections, that information here to Madison. I also served for 6 years on the City Council, representing District 12, roughly East High up to Warner Park. So I know how things work or don't work in City Hall, and I'm ready to get to work right away there. I have a collaborative leadership style. I've built a team at the Mayor's Innovation Project that is now ready to take over for me because I have empowered them and because I have been willing to collaborate. We work across many different organizations, and I'm ready to bring that collaboration into the mayor's office so that we can work with the county, the school district, surrounding municipalities, UW, the business community, to address the challenges that Madison faces. These challenges are not unique, they're not insurmountable. Together we can solve them, and I am eager to get to work and to bring the political courage that Madison needs to work on our most challenging issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Satya. Question number 1, and this will be the same question for each of the candidates. You can just rotate.
I'm going to be first. Who's going next?
Yes, you are first. You can. Yes, Satya will be first. You can stay up there. Question number 1. If elected, what would you specifically do to increase Madison's affordable housing stock and the mix of housing type in the city?
Thank you. That's a great question. I've been talking a lot about affordable housing because, as I said, I think it's one of our core challenges. And I'm fairly convinced that I couldn't afford to buy my house today if I was buying it again. So it is a challenge not just for the lowest income folks in our community, but for many of us. And I think that we have not been using the full toolbox around affordable housing. So I'd like to look at the whole spectrum from the most lowest income that we need to use the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to subsidize. But I'd like to also expand the use of that trust fund to preserve existing affordable housing, to rehabilitate it so it's healthy and safe for folks, to purchase land and land bank it, particularly so that we can create affordable housing around transit. As we build out bus rapid transit, we need to make sure that we're not displacing folks from those areas. And then we need to make sure that we are making it easier to create workforce housing. So we need to look at the development process and how we can make it easier to build workforce housing in this community. Just for example, some things that other cities have done. Some cities have guaranteed approval timeframes for projects that contain affordable housing. Others waive different requirements or give density bonuses. There's a lot we can learn from around the country, and I think we need to be using all of the tools in our toolbox. We should look at land trusts and co-ops, and that's my time.
Thank you.
How much time do we have?
90 seconds, a
90
minute and a
seconds.
half.
Okay, 8 years ago, of the 100 largest metro areas in the United States, Madison had the worst vacancy rate. The worst. Now, when we talk about vacancy rates, Madison, Wisconsin, which had a vacancy rate between 1.75% to 2%, is now at 3%. That is a significant improvement. We're not done yet. We have to get to 5%. But how did we do it? We did it because we had a mayor who made two significant changes, making changes that really separated us from the antiquated, failed policies of the previous 10 years when Satya was on the city council and we were stuck wasting $6 million on inclusionary zoning, which may work in Montgomery County, Maryland, but won't work under the laws of the state of Wisconsin. What did we do? First thing we did is we adopted a policy of using TIF dollars that could be extended one more year, ranging from $500,000 to up to $5 million to build affordable housing. We set a goal of 1,000 units, and I just read in the State Journal that between what we constructed and what is going on, it's 1,300 units. Show me a city in the United States that has done something like that in proportion to our size. The second thing we did is we changed how we worked with the private sector in applying for WIDA dollars. We changed how we did it. They were making application on their own, and I'll tell you later on how we changed it.
Thank you. Yes, you'll be up next for the second question, but I wanted to see if Satya wanted to respond at all to the comments the mayor made. If so, you would have 30 seconds to do so.
Thank you. I know that Paul wants to try and hang Brenda and inclusionary zoning around my neck, but honestly, that was before my time. And when it was time to sunset inclusionary zoning, I voted to do that.
All right, you're back up, Mayor. Question 2. As mayor, what are the first 3 things a city should do that it isn't doing right now to address the effects of climate change?
The question of climate change is unfortunately one that is mostly controlled at the federal level and at the state level, where we have the challenges of greenhouse gases that can be regulated in regards to transportation, which is one of the 2 main sources of the greenhouse gases in this nation, along obviously with what's happening with our buildings. When somebody's president repudiated the climate, the Paris Accords, one thing we did is we ended up as one of the leaders. Eventually 400 cities in this country said, we are going to stay focused. We are going to stay focused on the Paris Accords, and we will ratify them. Now, first thing we're going to do and are doing is implementing an all-electric bus fleet. The first of our electric buses will be coming in 2 years, and that is just the beginning of the stages that we're working on. Secondly, it's the use of solar. Third, it is a partnership with Madison Gas and Electric. MG&E is doing some very creative work. They're going to be partnering with us, collaborating. I know how to do it. Collaborating with MG, both on our transit plans, as well as working with those of you who live in buildings as to what you can do to avail yourself of solar, and I'll get to the second one later.
So over the past 13 years, this is an issue that I've worked on a lot with cities across the country, and what I've seen is that many cities have made commitments, like Madison has done, and many cities, like Madison, have failed to follow through on those commitments. I like to think about climate in 2 respects. One, we need to push, we have a decade to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, so we need to push there. But we also have to be ready for the impacts of climate change, because they're coming whether we like it or not. So we need to do a complete and thorough review based on the Wisconsin impacts on climate change initiatives to make sure that city functions are ready for what's changing about our climate. And that doesn't just include flooding, but it includes a whole range of things. That's one thing that I will do right away as mayor. Then we need to focus on reducing our emissions. And yes, it'd be great for us to have an all-electric fleet, but we need more and better transit, which is why I'm committed to implementing a bus rapid transit system here in Madison so that more people can use transit instead of driving their cars. We also need to continue to do the good work to reduce our emissions from city facilities, but even more important, we need to make sure that we're pushing out into the community. My theory on environmental sustainability work is that government should make it easy for you, the private sector, individual people to do the right thing. Right? So we need to make it possible for folks to make their buildings more energy efficient, to install renewable energy. We need to make it possible for folks to compost because food waste is one of the largest sources of methane. So we need to bring back the curbside composting program.
Thank you.
Not used to this shuffle.
Yep. Question 3. The 2019 operating budget increased spending by 5.5% and city property taxes by $72 on the average home. $54 million of the 2019 operating budget is being spent on paying for debt, and the capital budget relies on a record $185.4 million in authorized borrowing. The question, do you think this level of borrowing is problematic? And if so, what would you do to change this trajectory in the 2020 budget if elected?
Yeah, I think we do have to worry about the amount of debt service we have in our budget, and it's something that I was concerned about when I was on the council. I served on the finance committee for all 6 years. It's a difficult thing because obviously we need to invest in our infrastructure, but one of the things that I think has happened over the years as the capital budgets have continued to grow under multiple administrations, we have failed to really distinguish between wants and needs. And it's very important for us to stay focused on what the community needs and not on projects that would be nice to have, but might be better if they were done not with public money. So my approach to the capital budget and to the budget overall is to make sure that we are laser focused on a set of priorities and that we're holding folks accountable to those priorities and that we're not layering on projects that would be nice to have but that are not critical to the community. So, for example, we might not have spent millions of dollars on Judge Doyle Square under my administration. I would look at things like Garver Feed Mill and the public market, although they're both great projects. It's not clear to me how much public money they need. And I think that we have to stay focused. There are a set of challenges in this community that we need to focus on. And our budgets are a reflection of our values. And if we can't stay focused on the things that are most important to our community, then we're not doing something right.
You would hope that annually, each year, you would steadily take care of the responsibilities of infrastructure in a community. From 2003 through 2009, the city of Madison failed to do that. We did not take care of the infrastructure, and we did not do the required commitment to the people of this community. In those last 2 years of that period I just described, my opponent was on the city council. In 2010 and 2011, the borrowing skyrocketed, absolutely went through the roof, and that took us on the present trajectory. I came into office, inherited that 2011 budget, and I want to point out to you that I made a commitment to you, to the people of this city, that we were going to do two things. We were going to be financially responsible, and we were going to reorder our priorities in regards to the city of Madison needs, particularly investing in race and equity. And a public market is more than just a public market. I changed that. It wasn't a public market for business people and for tourists. It's going to be a public market where real people can buy fresh fruits and vegetables at an affordable cost with dirt on them, and where we're going to have 2/3 of the vendors being merchants, people of color, who've gone through our Market Ready program. But the important thing is this. I ran into conflicts with the city council, and I stood up for you. I stood up for the people of this
And you're at your
community.
time. Thank you. All right, next question. Given the city's financial constraints, what steps would you prioritize to make transportation more efficient, affordable, and accessible to all Madison residents?
I've returned to office 3 times, and every one of those 3 times, ridership in our transit system increased. Now, I must apologize for this last year because not one city in the United States had an increase in its public transit ridership, principally for 2 reasons. 1, the declining cost of fuel, and 2, the advent of Uber and Lyft, which is creating more and more congestion and creating greenhouse gases because of the individual ridership. Madison, Wisconsin was never looking at bus rapid transit, despite Satya saying we've been studying it for 30 years. That's just nonsense. In 2010, 2011, the first serious examination of BRT began with a study commissioned by the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO. And at that time, when they produced their report, I took it with the city staff and we started moving forward on BRT. We do not have $200 million to implement BRT. But I said to the staff, we will move forward as though we do, because we have got to make a commitment to public transit, making it affordable, and making it worse, not just for the people of the community, because of the environmental benefits it'll bring to our city and to our region. With that, we are looking at 2 objectives, which are very difficult to achieve. One is the state of Wisconsin adopting a regional transit authority, and the second is federal assistance. We are now applying for 2 more grants in this area.
Thank you.
I've been a bus commuter in this town ever since I moved here because my employer gave me a free bus pass at my first job. And I've been fortunate to continue to work at UW where I get a subsidized bus pass. So I know this bus system intimately. I know what works and what doesn't. I am committed to implementing a bus rapid transit system, but it's not just about the bus rapid transit spines. It's about making sure that our entire system serves our entire community. We need better service second and third shift so folks can get to work. We need to make it possible for folks who live downtown but work out, for example, at Epic, to take transit to reduce congestion through the isthmus. And we need to make sure that it's a viable system for folks of all walks of life, honestly. Otherwise, it's not going to be successful. We do need to do that through partnerships. It would be great if the state would give us an RTA back. And I will certainly lobby for that. It's a necessary thing. But we have to move forward regardless. And part of how we'll do that is by forming partnerships with surrounding municipalities and with the county and with the business community. There are many things that employers can do to encourage the use of transit, and I'd like to work with many of you to make that happen in our community for all of the benefits, but mostly so that folks can get to work. I've heard too many stories of people who don't get an interview or can't take a job because it would take them 2 hours on transit to get there. And that's not okay in this community. We have to make a transit system that's available to everybody.
Thank you. Would you like to offer a rebuttal, Mayor Soglin? You would have 30 seconds.
Well, first of all, the implementation of bus passes through employers began with my administration. Secondly, I was working at Epic on the private side when we implemented the bus system route that serves Epic. Thirdly, we are undergoing an examination of all the routes on an equitable basis, and we've already made 2 changes. Changes on a route that serves parallel to the Beltline, as well as the new service we implemented 5 years ago for Owl Creek. There's several other things we've done.
That's 30 seconds. Thank you. All right. Racial inequities persist in the city. What are 3 specific initiatives you would pursue or continue to invest in to close these gaps in Madison?
When we talk about racial equity in this town, I think too often we're conflating it with economic inequality. I want to recognize that that's a real problem and that we need to be continued to focus on low-income neighborhoods, which are disproportionately of color. But I want to recognize another problem, which I think is not getting enough airtime, and that's the problem of professionals of color who do not feel welcome in this community and feel like there aren't opportunities for their children and are wondering if it's worth them retiring here. And I hear this again and again when I talk to folks, and this is something that the city really has to take on. So 3 things. One, I want to focus on how do we better support entrepreneurs of color to start businesses that will particularly serve professionals of color in our community, and not just retail or service, but also entertainment. And how do we make that, really open up that opportunity for folks living here? The other thing that I want to do is to start an Office of Community Engagement. This has been proposed by the Task Force on Government Structure. I'm very interested in their full proposal when it comes out, but I think we need to do a better job of listening to communities and then being accountable to them on what we heard. And then finally, I want to say, I think we have to turn upside down how we think about what have traditionally been called challenged neighborhoods, right? Neighborhoods aren't problems. Neighborhoods are where people live. We need to treat them as assets.
Thank you.
If you make any decision as to how you vote in this election, I hope you do it based on the answer to this question. If white income was to be frozen in this nation, it would be over 200 years before African American income would catch up and we'd end the disparity. Now, let's talk about 50 to 70 years from now. What are we going to do now to make that difference? What we're going to do is continue the route that my administration has taken. You saw it with Luna's, and we are going to expand it. And yes, it is all about entrepreneurship. I shouldn't say all. Half of it is about entrepreneurship. It is about expanding in terms of retail and supporting minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and that will then make a substantial contribution to closing gaps of income, closing gaps in regards to household ownership, home ownership, and the issue of participation in the larger community. But the second thing we have to do is close the gap on health. It is absolutely critical that we address the gap in health, and I want to point out that I had set up a program and
Thank you. You're still up. All right, how can the city leverage economic development tools like tax increment financing to encourage development and job creation? In your answer, please cite an example of TIF that has worked well and one that could have been improved.
Well, obviously the TIF that works the best is the last one we did, the one with exact sciences, the first job TIF in the community. And what did we do? We said to the employer, and I got to point this out, I can't remember, was it $600,000 or $800,000 per job in terms of the Foxconn deal? So we're talking somewhere around $4,000, $5,000 per job, which we will get back, In any case, we did a negotiation with the employer, and here's what we came up with. Number one, you are going to have to sign a contract with the Urban League for training. And I just saw an announcement the other day that the Urban League is now in its second or third class in terms of training people in that census tract, which is one of the lowest income census tracts in the city of Madison, for those jobs. And there have already been so many successful hires. $15 an hour starting wage, pension, and health insurance. That's what's going on in this city right now. Those are the kinds of standards. That's the innovation that I brought to this community that is going to change our lives over the next 10 to 20 years. The other thing we have to do in regards to TIF is understand that it is of benefit long-term in building a tax base, and that means we have to cooperate with developers. There, I said it. We're going to have to work with them.
One of the things that I learned on the council through the process of shepherding developments in my district was that we send really mixed messages as a city to the development community. Our plans, our zoning our TIF districts, our urban design districts. We send a lot of different messages. And as a result, I think it can be hard to tell what the city wants and what is actually going to be easy to get done. One of the things that I would like to do is to sort of rationalize that, to be sending clearer messages about what the city wants and what we don't want. So, for example, I think we want workforce affordable housing, right? And so we need to make it easy to do that in this town. And I would work to make that true. I think there's a lot to be done there. But you asked for some specifics. One of the things that I think hasn't worked well in our use of TIF is our use of small cap TIF. This is a program that's been very successful in Milwaukee, but we just haven't gotten it right here. It's supposed to help regular folks invest in their homes or in a small multi-unit rental, and it just hasn't really taken off. So I think we need to revisit that, because I think it can be a powerful tool for revitalizing neighborhoods if we use it correctly. So that's another thing that I think we need to do going forward. And I think I'm almost at time. Okay, good. So I do think actually that I'll give the mayor credit for the exact sciences TIF. I do think that's a really interesting concept, and I'd like to see how we can take it even farther.
Thank you. All right, next question. What should the mayor's role be with respect to public safety and the police department?
The mayor needs to be responsible and I think accountable for the actions of the police department. It does not make sense to me that the police department thinks that they are not accountable to elected officials. Given the deep importance of public safety in our community, it does not make any sense for elected officials to not have a role in that, and that is something that I will work on as mayor. We have a pretty big trust gap in our community between the police department and many of our residents. And that's very disturbing to me, because it means that all of us are less safe as a result. So there's a lot of work to be done. I'm very interested. I don't know how many of you have read the OIR report, but I think that was a set of really good recommendations, some of which have been implemented, but all of which we need to work on. And I'm very much looking forward to the report from the Task Force on Police Policy and Procedure. I think that body has done years of really good work, and I'm eager to see what they recommend. I'm not saying I'm going to agree with all of their recommendations, because I haven't seen them yet, but I'm eager to see them and to work with that group going forward to implement them. I think accountability in our police department is incredibly important, and that's something that we need to bring not just to the highest levels, but all through the force. And the other thing that I will mention is the use of data.
Thank you.
We are all awaiting this report, which is long overdue, but fortunately, the department has moved forward and has implemented quite a number of significant changes. For example, there's greater community involvement on an experimental basis on the north side, and we are working to expand that throughout the city. There are changes in procedures and policies in regards to the use of force. There is changes in procedures in regards to engagement on the scene. And I want to point out that since I've returned to office, we've seen almost a 1/3 reduction in the number of arrests of juveniles. Excuse me, 2/3. We're arresting that many fewer. That's terrible, Paul. We're arresting far fewer juveniles in the last 8 years. But I want to point out the other thing that the police department did was got engaged with our peer support effort, and I want to go rapidly through this, hold on to these numbers. In the 16 or 15 months prior to August of 2017, we had 14 homicides involving young African American men. Most of those homicides involved the shooter and the victim. We went and we orchestrated a collaborative set of meetings over a 6-month period of time with people from the Focused Interruption Coalition and Dane County. In the last 16 months, we've had 4 such homicides from collaboration.
The ending signal for you, Mayor.
In collaboration with the police department.
Thank you. All right. This will be our last question before closing remarks. A city committee is currently studying the structure of local government. What changes do you think could be made to improve representation of Madison residents?
I'm not sure I want to go there. All right, let's start out with this. First off, this city council was always one that was expected to serve for an honorarium. And then that city council, twice in 4 years, voted itself significant raises to the point where it is now a part-time city council. But the important thing is, these were last-minute budget amendments that were not shared with you. Second thing, this is Madison, Wisconsin. We have 20 members of the city council in a city of 250,000. It was an enormous council when we were a city of 180,000. We have to decide, you have to decide, not the city council, whether or not we want a council working for an honorarium, a part-time council, or a full-time council. And you have to decide whether or not you want a council of this size, which, as they say so often, as we get into debates, it's already been said, but it hasn't been said by everyone. This is a discussion that the people of this city have to make, not the elected officials.
Well, I think government structure is a lot more than the city council. I'm very interested in the results of that task force. One thing that when I went and testified in front of them that I talked about was the committee system, and how I feel like we ask a lot of incredibly smart and talented people to give up many hours of their lives with questionable results and outcomes. I think a lot of time is wasted because committees don't have direction, they fail to make quorum, they don't know what they're supposed to be working on or what the jurisdiction of their committee is. So I'd like to work through the committee process so that we are making better use of your time, frankly, those of you that serve on committees, and that we can attract better talent to those committees because it feels worth it. I also think, regardless of the size of the council, which I don't really think needs to change, the council does need better staff support that can do more of the constituent service work so that council members can actually focus on policy and on thinking not just about their own districts, but about the whole city. I want to make the council a partner and to work with them to tackle the large issues that this city faces. And in order to do that, they're going to need some capacity. Again, a collaborative approach with the council and with committees is something I'm committed to. I mentioned this already, but I really think that we need to look at an Office of Community Engagement so that we're doing a better job of working with the community, particularly those that are most impacted by issues of racism. Then that's my time. Thank you.
And we begin closing remarks.
So those that are most impacted by issues of racism and income disparities. So in closing, let me say thank you. I appreciate you all taking time here to listen to us. You've heard a lot about a lot of issues. I think that it's time for us as a city to stop talking and planning and to start doing. I have set out some clear priorities, I hope, that you agree with. And those are what I will be focused on as mayor. I think it's important for us to create a culture of accountability in City Hall, not just between the mayor and residents, but with department heads, with frontline staff, across the board. We need to make sure that folks understand what we are pushing towards and how we're going to get there, and that we hold ourselves accountable to that. I hope in the process of our time here I have earned your vote. If you're interested in learning more about me, please visit satyaformadison.com. That's SATYA for Madison.com, where you'll be able to read lots more about policy positions. I am a policy wonk. Did I mention that? So there's lots of information about issues, but also more information about me. And let me just say again that I think the challenges that Madison are facing, affordable housing, rapid transit, racial disparities, and the impacts of climate change are critical. They are tipping point issues for our city. They can't be ignored. They have to be worked on, and if we don't get this right, it will be exponentially more expensive and difficult to address these things. But more importantly, real people will be hurt, and our economy will suffer. It's time for us to stay focused on what's really important for this community and to move forward. I'm excited about the potential of this city. We have so much going for us. We are such a great place to live for so many people. But really, Madison needs to be a place where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. And I hope that you will help me make that possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Satya.
This last winter, the Brookings Institute completed an evaluation of the 100 largest cities in the United States. They found that there were 11 cities, and yes, Madison was one of them, that not only had shown economic progress over the past decade, but that it had been equitable and had been shared among all racial and ethnic groups. 11 cities, Madison, Wisconsin was one of them. You heard earlier when I repeated some of the data, the economic data, that has so significantly changed regarding unemployment and household income and children living in poverty. That took vision and innovation. It took vision and innovation. I'm the youngest guy in this room. Thank you. I want you to go look at the last agenda from the Mayor's Innovation Project. Read off the list of things that were on there. Opioids? Madison is one of the 5 cities that's a team selected by the National League of Cities to deal with the opioid crisis. A week ago Monday, I was in Dayton, Ohio, meeting with Mayor Nan Whaley and reviewing the progress that they'd made and looking at the deficits in our own program, which we're going to change. Participatory budgeting? Talk about participatory budgeting. Look at what our neighborhood resource teams did in engagement with the folks at Owl Creek and ended up with bus service there that nobody had had or ever dreamed of. But the point is this. This city has made tremendous progress in the last decade. I don't know about you, but I see that there's more to be done. And just saying that you're innovative does not mean you're accountable. I have been accountable to you and to the people of this city, and I will continue to do so. And I want to point out, health is a critical issue that we must have further engagement on, and we are committed.
Thank you, Mayor Soglin. Thank you to both candidates for spending your afternoon with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Abigail, for serving as our moderator. And let's give one more round. And once again, let's thank our 2 candidates for appearing today. We are adjourned.